one quarter, and this is an amazing stat, one quarter, more than one quarter of our entire $31.4 trillion debt was accumulated during the Trump administration. Yet Democrats voted 3 times to raise the debt ceiling because they realized we may not approve of all this spending. We may have disagreements, but the way to have these debates is not to hold the full faith and credit of the United States as well as people's 401ks hostage. But sure enough, we're hearing more and more noise from this Congress that they are going to try to hold the American economy and as well as the stock market, people's 401ks and God knows what, hostage to raising the debt limit. And what bothers me so much is that, you know, it's almost like if you go out and go on a spending binge on your credit card and you bounce the payment check, that's pretty dumb. This is money that you've already spent. So if you want to deal with your spending habits, don't bounce your credit card check and ruin your credit. Talk about what you're not going to spend in the future. So I hope that you're not on board with this MAGA crowd in using the debt limit as a hostage. But how do you feel about this?
Well, as far as Trump, it was a pox on both houses in terms of the binge spending. And I asked the Treasury Department of Trump on air multiple times, why are you spending so much? You're spending way too much. This is excessive. And I actually think this is going to be a vulnerability if DeSantis, for example, in the primary against Trump, he'll say, look, I tried to keep Florida open and you wanted to shut Florida down. And not only did you do that, you ballooned our debt and you ballooned our spending in an overreaction and overreach to COVID. Because that's when, let's be honest, that's when this spending happened under Trump. It was because of COVID. And that was both Democrats and Republicans.
Tax cut also, so come on, be honest. Tax cut as well.
Well, that's paid for itself with the increase in revenues, but the spending, and I'm glad to hear that you're now concerned about 401ks and the stock market, because the last 2 years of the Biden administration, you were all on board with infrastructure and a lot of the so-called Build Back Better initiatives and this massive spending bill that just passed a few weeks ago. That is what's been driving inflation, and that's what's been destroying our stock market. That's what's been making the Fed overcorrect by hiking the interest rate so high. So I think if Democrats wanted to be on any sort of moral high ground against the excess of the Trump administration spending, they should have done it in these last 2 years, and they didn't. So, and yes, I think the congressional Republicans should have tried to do more. They didn't really have as much leverage, but certainly they could have done more. And the fact is, something has to give here as far as the interest payments on our debt. Our debt to GDP ratio is now, it's World War II levels. It's not sustainable. We don't have any more runway to keep pretending like it's an emergency. We can't keep living in a state of crisis. So yeah, the debt ceiling is kicking it forward down the road. It's a crisis. I just never hear, and I've actually been shocked to hear there have been a couple moderate Democrats who want to start talking about fiscal responsibility, and I applaud that. I think that's great. I just think they're swimming up against upstream here, and that their colleagues aren't going to be supportive of that. I think there's got to be a way that you can have a deal. I know that McCarthy's supposed to come up to the White House, and they're going to talk about what needs to happen. So I think there's still time. Treasury's doing the extraordinary measures. So I think there's a lot of histrionics around what's actually the timeline here. So, but I also think that this moment you should use whatever negotiation you can.
So Democrats should have used that then during the Trump administration then. The 3 times they voted to raise the ceiling, because you gave me a hell of a speech, but you haven't really answered the question. So then Democrats were bad. They should have done the same thing during the Trump administration then. Yeah,
absolutely. I think they should have asked questions about the spending for sure. Yeah, I think The look, I used to work at Moody's Investor Service. I used to rate bonds, and the team down the hall was the sovereign bond team. They kept the AAA rating. S&P downgraded during the Obama years in part because of the debt ceiling situation. I think in some ways it's a chicken or egg thing. The debt ceiling is a symptom of a bigger spending problem. You're right about that. But the fact of the matter is, we never stop. The punch bowl is always there. And I wish there was some way to actually have accountability around, there should be some sort of triggers of cuts the closer you get to the debt ceiling, so that yes, you will never breach the debt ceiling, but you will have the automated cuts. I think that's actually the solution that would be the best.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I think the fact that Congress should vote on the votes on the debt ceiling is ridiculous anyway, because you vote before you spend. You don't vote about whether you're going to bounce the payment check. Okay, so that is really a very incredibly stupid thing. So let's put that aside. Secondly, I want to correct something. You said I was supporting of Biden and his spending. No, what I have said is I wish that they hadn't passed the American Rescue Plan, which just handed out a lot of money, and instead I wish they would have passed Build Back Better, because Build Back Better actually spends money instead of just giving it to people on things that would really help the economy, like childcare, like pre-K, things like that. So if Biden had been smart, he would have introduced Build Back Better first, and then I don't think we would have had the inflation problem, and I think you would have had a much better return to the workforce, because people would have had more childcare, they would have had more care at home. So I just want to clarify that. But getting back to the debt ceiling, all I can say is this, people always, and first of all, I want to say one thing. If you go back and you look at the amount of national debt that was created, it is so much more of it has been created under Republican presidents. I mean, think about it, right? Reagan was the first president that got us living beyond our means. We never used to run a deficit unless it was wartime. Then Clinton came in and the budget was balanced. Part of that was working with Congress and Newt. I will admit it was a team effort. Then Bush came in, blew it out again. Okay, then Obama came in, lowest increase in government spending since the Eisenhower administration during Obama's first term. He got the deficit down from 1.4 trillion to 400 billion. Trump came in, blew it out again. So if you look at where the percentage of this national debt, the overwhelming percentage of it has come from Republican presidents. Okay, that is a fact. Okay, so it's very hypocritical to me that they are the ones these Republican congressmen who have enabled this are the ones that are now saying, oh, we have to hold the economy hostage. Here's my suggestion. All right, you want to start negotiating? You make an announcement. You list, what are you going to cut, right? Because they had this thing where they were asking these MAGA people, all right, oh, we have to cut spending. It's terrible. We have to get rid of all the spending. Okay, what do you want to cut? Oh, okay. Well, foreign aid. Oh, okay. That's 0.5%. What else? What about Social Security and Medicare? No, we can't cut that. What about some welfare? Oh, can't cut that. So again, they rail against spending in the abstract, but when it comes to actually coming through, so let's have Kevin McCarthy and his loony bin of Marjorie Taylor Greene and all these wonderful people that he's given power to, which is going to make this the most ineffectual Congress. And remember, I said it here before, whatever you think of Nancy Pelosi, you are going to appreciate her, because she had a spine and she know how to run things. This is going to be a loony bin the next 2 years. Nothing's going to get done except investigations. And I would say the only chance that Republicans or the Democrats have of holding the Senate, because we'll talk about this at a future show, but the Senate map for Democrats in 24 is ugly. I mean, really ugly. I think it's 23 to 11 is the number of seats, but more than that, all the Democratic seats from Joe Manchin in West Virginia to John Tester in Montana to Sherrod Brown in Ohio, all these seats in red states are up, where I don't think the Republicans have to defend really a seriously competitive seat. The only chance that the Democrats have of keeping the Senate is just like because of what Republicans did to help them keep the Senate this time, the House is going to get out of control. No legislation is going to get passed. They're going to push us to the brink on the debt limit, and there's going to be all these investigations. I mean, if Kevin McCarthy really thinks the American people want to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop, as I've said before, good luck. That's not what we want. People want governance. And I think if the 2022 election proved one thing to Republicans, that is, if you are considered good and competent at governance, then people will tolerate the other stuff. I mean, look at DeSantis, look at Brian Kemp, right, in Georgia. Look at Mike DeWine in Ohio. I mean, these people won by double digits, right, or almost double digits in some cases. So it was the loonies, the people that focused on the culture wars, or the people that were just spectacularly unqualified. You know, the Herschel Walkers. Those were the people that lost. Your thoughts?
You packed a lot in there, my friend. I like your plan about making a line item of items to cut. And I think that you'd actually hear a lot of things from Republicans, things like, so for Social Security, there should be cutoffs, and like whether you're a very, very wealthy senior or a very poor senior, the government doesn't care. They don't treat you any differently in terms of getting that check. And I think there should be some means testing. I think they should change the age limit at which it starts. I think for Medicaid and some of these welfare programs, they're getting into middle class programs. And if you add up all these benefits for families, there's a reason why we have so many people not working. It's because it's actually more generous to not work. That is a big problem, and that's some of the cuts that we can do to make it more sustainable for people who actually need the safety net, the most vulnerable among us. I was on Medicaid when I was in college because I got bitten by a dog and I had to get rabies shots, and I couldn't afford it out of pocket, but Medicaid covered the bill for me because I was under 19. It was, thank God, right before I turned 19. But and my parents were on welfare when I was younger, you know, at least one point. And I am now paying a lot more back into the system because I have the mentality that it is a temporary, it should be a safety net, but unfortunately it's become a lifestyle for a lot of people at the vast encouragement of the Democrats, who are more interested in keeping people trapped instead of giving them a springboard to intergenerational wealth creation and property ownership. They'd rather have them poor and dependent on the government. I think that's an easy case to go through and find some ways that we can restructure the programs for that. As far as all the other things you're talking about with the House Republicans, I think part of why, I disagree with some of the things that Marjorie Taylor Greene says, or Matt Gaetz, or some of these folks. But the fact of the matter is, they don't have to be as well spoken as you or I might want to know that there is something viscerally wrong with the status quo when it comes to spending. And unfortunately, the more, genteel and well-spoken Republicans have very genteelly driven America off a cliff. So if there's someone who's more crass and says things that are off the wall, or I disagree with, or too extreme, but they're understanding that the country is basically in need of an intervention, let's have that intervention. Because to date, the more mainstream, dare I say, Rockefeller Republicans, they haven't been able to stop our country from going into record $30 trillion of debt.
Well, again, and by the way, this is a fact. You can look, as Casey Stengel said, you can look it up. The Republicans have created far more of the national debt than Democrats. Can you please acknowledge that? Because it's a fact.
I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about these houses.
Can you just give me a yes or no question, please? Because this is, I'd like to have you at least acknowledge that.
As I said at the very beginning, that's what I literally just said. The mainstream Republicans, there's a reason the Trump base despises the Bush family, because the Bush family did exactly what you said, my friend, that Bush did not live up to his principles. He was reckless when it came to spending. He was reckless on a number of things.
Trump was the most reckless of all. Trump was the most reckless of all. That's where that argument falls apart. Trump was more reckless.
Well, that's where COVID comes into play. That's where COVID comes into play, and that's where, like I said, he's vulnerable to DeSantis on that front, and we'll see.
Yeah. So we'll see. But again, I think that I would love to see Kevin McCarthy put forward a list of what exactly he thinks should be cut. Because again, this is a mostly Republican caused problem, and I would like to see what they want to cut, because I think it's the problem is it's very hard to find the fat. But well, another great exchange. Always a pleasure, Carrie. And thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. We will see you next time on Practically Political. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. We will catch you next time.